Jim and Phyllis Rodenbush, who are our newest members. Yay, welcome. And Craig Welker. And our speakers tonight, Lynn Henninger and his wife, Helen. By way of an introduction, I'd like to tell you that for many years, my husband, Dennis, told me he was not related to the Henningers at the mill. Dennis said he was from the meat market Henningers. Lynn and Helen's daughter Tanya and our daughter Sherry, who is here tonight, became best friends in high school, still believing they were not related. I, of course, had to prove my husband wrong. I was able to secure some genealogy research, which was done in the 60s by John Henninger, who's no longer with us, and sure enough, Dennis and Lynn are related. In fact, Lynn and Dennis's father, Bill, are fourth cousins, and Tanya and Dennis would be fifth cousins. That means that Lynn and Bill would have the same great-great-great-grandfather. So, by way of introduction, I'd like to introduce our relative, Lynn Henninger.
Well, Dennis, I don't know which that's the most scary for you or me. Learning that we're related all of a sudden.
Well, I've known them for a little while. I could be related to a lot worse.
Well, Dennis and I have known each other for a long time and enjoy each other. We served on the Upper Dauphin School Board for a time, and I had the privilege of serving on the school board with both Dennis and Marilyn. So, and that's when Dennis said, when he served with me there, he definitely doesn't want to be related. What can I say? When Marilyn asked me to speak this evening, I was a little concerned, and I am still concerned, because I'm not sure what I have that would be of interest to all of you. But I decided that I'd like to share a little bit with you, and talk a little bit about our situation, and share with you two segments. I'd like to share with you one segment of my father and my mother's time and life, and they started the business, and then a second segment when I came back home and got involved, and we continued to hopefully take it to another level or whatever. So that's sort of the way I would like to approach it if I could. And I want to remind you that whatever I share with you tonight, and I say this in all sincerity, whatever I share with you tonight, or whatever accomplishments we may have or may not have made, it's not me. It's because of the people that I had on my team and that we were associated with. And I tell you, I feel so fortunate when I look at today and see some of the people and the organizations and so forth. I think how lucky I was to be in business in a time when we had quality people with good work ethic and came to do a job or take care of things. So I feel very fortunate, and I do want to just point out one couple that's here tonight, and that's Dan and Bob Langhans. And I'll talk a little bit more about Dan and his role. Raise your hand, Dan. Anyway, he said he was coming tonight. I said, don't you dare. But he showed up. So when I was visiting with him today, I tried to talk him out of it, but I didn't get too far. But anyway, my mother and dad were born in about 1905. They were similar in age. My mother was born here in Elizabethville, and her mother was Martha Motter, and her dad was Will Motter. And I don't think, from what I remember, that she finished high school, frankly. But she was very good with figures and very sharp. And let me tell you, she was my dad's right arm and then some, as far as keeping things straight, and keeping the books and so forth. She was a very important part of his team in his time, I can assure you. And of course, my dad graduated from Lycus Valley Vocational High School, the School of Perrysburg, And then he went on to Shippensburg and graduated from Shippensburg with a teaching degree. And he always told the story, and I'll share it with you, because I think I got slided through all this. He worked his way through school. I say he cut his way through school by being a barber. And somehow he convinced the dean, he allowed him, if you can imagine this, to put an actual barber's chair in his room. And basically, he financed himself, and I always say, cut his way through college by cutting hair. Well, of course, so he's an accomplished barber. You know that my brother and I never got to go to a barber. He cut our hair and cut my hair until I went to college. And then when I went to college, I lost them all, and I never did get to another barber. So I always say I was slighted. But anyway, he did do that. He was always an energetic person, and he was very much that way as far as working his way through school. He also taught school for a couple of years. I'm not sure how many. I don't know if it was 2 or 3. Down at Paxton, up at 147. Now he was born, his dad was John F. Henninger, and their farm was right outside of Berrysburg. We still own it. It was the homestead. And he tells me that many a day he walked from there to Paxton to teach and back, which I have no reason to question. But I'm not sure how many of us, including me, would be walking to Paxton to do a job or to teach school. So once again, I credit him very much for that. They had 4 children. My oldest sister, Jean, married to John Whitmer, and then my next sister, Lois, married to Don Miller, and my brother, Marlon Jr., married to Janet Morris, and then I was the youngest. They always claimed I was the baby of the family who was spoiled. I don't think so, but they claimed that. And of course, I married Helen, which was the best thing I did in my life, I'm sure. And I mean that sincerely. Most important, without a question. But anyway, just to tell you a little bit about his time, he was teaching school, and he always told me that, I don't know, there was a story how it came about, and I won't bore you, but in 1928, he got this opportunity to buy the Berrysburg Roller Mill. Now, that's what it went by at that time, and it was owned by a gentleman by the name of George Stockey, who, after selling the mill, moved to Bronzeville, Texas, and went into the fruit grove business down there. But I guess he was ready to leave our area and wanted to get to a warmer climate or something. But that's the gentleman that Dad bought it from. And I have a calendar right there, and anyone can walk up and look at it then. But my dad worked hard and did a lot of things in order to make himself get anywhere. And I'll just read what it says on here. Cumberland Sperrysburg Roadmer. Distributor of Emco feeds, treated childs, flour feed, grain, seed, salt, lime, cement, and coal, electrical supplies, all kinds of wiring done. Headquarters for the most famous IMP boilers. He was a pretty accomplished man as far as his mechanical ability as well as his other ability, and a very accomplished electrician. As a matter of fact, his last, I'm going to say 10 years of active work, he was a union electrician in Harrisburg. And he said that this was after I got involved in taking over, and he said it was like a vacation. Didn't need to worry about anything. He got up in the morning, went to Harrisburg, came home, and he was done. He enjoyed it. But he really was. He was a sharp man and worked very hard, and so forth. And the original mill, any of you that are familiar with Schiffer's Mill, the original mill would have looked pretty much like that. It was a 3-story wooden building, about 42 by 60, but it was a dual-purpose mill. One part of it, they made flour. They had wheat and milled flour, and the other part, they ground and made feed and mixed it for farmers. They brought in their grist there and then took it back home. So it was sort of a dual-purpose type mill, and they handled it that way. And he also had, I always say they wore many hats those days, and Dan Langhans knows we wore many hats in our day too. It wasn't just like we did one thing. But as time progressed and so forth, he, of course, was a pre and feed dealer. That was the main the main part of the mill other than the flour. And he told me a time that he would make flour all day, and then at night he would haul that flour to Philadelphia on a 6-ton truck and take it to Philadelphia. And that's the kind of work that they all went through in doing that. But he told me also of the Depression days, and when he would get paid with animals rather than cash, because the farmers had no cash. And then he, with, I guess, my mother's help, and I don't know who else, would butcher them and sell the meat, and that way he kept his cash flow going. So I guess sometimes we think we have pretty hard times. Maybe most of us here have had it pretty good compared to what some of our ancestors went through. He was also, believe it or not, a Massey Harris farm equipment dealer. And any one of you that are associated with farms recognize the name Massey Harris. He was a farm equipment dealer with that. He built one of the biggest chicken houses for that time, a 3-story, right near the mill. On this picture here, it would have been over in that other corner. He had a big turkey house there and so forth, and so on. And so he was the kind of guy that was sort of on the cutting edge. I'll give him credit. He really was. He wasn't afraid to try anything new. He and John Whitmer built the first cage house, chicken with cages, in our valley. That was before the Elwood Williard and the Spread Eagle time, if those of you that are older and remember that. It was before that time. And when they built that, they put 1 chicken per cage. They had a card above the cage, and then you would go down the line and pick the eggs. Well, if there was an egg in this guy's compartment, he got a stroke. If the other guy didn't lay an egg, he didn't get a stroke. So they touted the idea that you can really keep track of who's producing and who isn't, but it was rather inefficient, the time consuming and so forth, and eventually that went by the wayside. He was also, if not the first, he wasn't the first, but he was one of the first fellows that used no-till planting. Now, any of you people that are involved with farming, you know about no-till planting. I can still remember when they made the first planting in the field across from the mill, and our man that ran the mill says, that will never work. And today, there's very few plantings done that are not no-till. It became a way, but he was one of the first people to do that as well. So I really feel that I have to give him credit that he was innovative. He was, during his time, he had accumulated 3 farms. He had what we call the Stover, Hartman, and the Copenhagen farms that he had gotten at that time. And anyway, they were doing well. They worked hard and they were doing well. And in December 7th, 1946, was a tremendous big blow for them. And my dad used to take us to the movies on a Saturday night, and I'll never forget. The family was in the movies at the Hollywood Theater in Eagle. Who remembers the Hollywood Theater? There was some, okay. And anyway, long story short, they came and notified him that his mill was on fire. Well, we got a pretty fast ride back to Berrysburg that night, and the mill burned to the ground. Now this was in December. Those days, all the grains were stored in wooden bins in these old mills. So it was filled with grain and all kinds of things, a feed, so forth, and it all burned to the ground. Berrysburg at that time didn't have a fire company, but by the way, that brought it on. The next year, the Berrysburg Fire Company was formed. And I was always told that they realized they needed one after that catastrophe. But anyway, at that point, again, I have to credit my parents tremendously. They were pretty well down and out. They didn't have proper insurance. They had some, but not near enough to cover where they were at. And if anything, they were probably worth less, a minus rather than a plus. But they didn't let it stop him. He decided that he was going to rebuild. Who remembers Tommy Horman? Well, we got a couple. Tommy Horman was a craftsman beyond approach. He was really good. He hired him to build a new mill. And they built a new mill, and it took them almost a year and a half. Over a year and a half. And I think it was August of 48. They went back into the new mill. And at that point, there was nothing in that mill that wasn't cement and blocks. He said, this one will not burn down. And they spent tremendous, in those days you didn't get a ready mix truck. They shoveled the cement in a mixer and everything was done by hand. And it took about a year and a half. Even the round roof that's on the mill, you have the right picture. They used laminated wood and formed those rafters in the bill on the floor after they had built the floor, and then put them up all by hand, all done there. And but anyway, he was going to be pretty sure that that one wasn't. If you ever needed a fortress or a place to be safe, that's probably the best built place in that corner of the furnace room, Dan, that I know of, as far as not coming down or blowing down. They did a real job. But anyway, that's pretty much what they did. But they came back, and then in '48 they came back together again and got it going. And then a couple of years, well, I guess that would have been in '50, maybe '58. He built those grain bins that we had outside of the mill, and then he continued to build back and so forth. And really, by the time I got home, he had things going very well again. Now I graduated from Penn State in 1960, and my plan was always to come back home to the business. That's just something I always wanted to do, right or wrong. So anyway, I came back in '60, and at that time, I was planning to jump right into things. And Central Dauphin, now I had a degree in agriculture education, and Central Dauphin was at that time becoming suburbanized tremendously, and they were phasing out their agriculture program and needed a teacher for 1 year to finish it. And Charlie Ebo, if any of you remember him, he was one of our teachers and then became the state ag man, came after me because he knew I could have cared less about teaching longer than a year. But anyway, wanted me to do the job, and I was hesitating. And again, the wisdom of my father, he said, you know what? Why don't you do that? It's only a year. And he said, then when you have a bad day here, you'll know what it would have been like teaching. Good wisdom. But more than that, it gave me a respect and a little more understanding of the education field. And I was very glad, and I am very glad that I did it. But again, it was some of his wisdom. Well, when I came back in '60, just to give you an idea how far those times are away now, we didn't have a truck. We had one truck that hauled about 8 tons. Didn't have a dump. There was a hole that my dad had in the floor right behind the tire, or front of the tire. And if you had a load of grain on that truck on a 14-foot bed, you shoveled every bit of it to that hole. That was it. And but we hauled bags. When I came back, I had an office in my mother's house. There was the mill was all taken up with things. Our house was right next to the mill, and I had an office in there. I spent a lot of my time in sales, trying to build a business. A lot of evenings or nights, early mornings, I'd haul a load of feed. And I missed telling you one thing about the fire. I just thought of that now. I want to come back. When the fire was, if you're familiar with well, there you can see the house. It's pretty close to the mill. The fire was that hot that it peeled the paint off the house. And they were convinced the house was going to burn. And the people, to try and be helpful, went in the house, grabbed the drawers that were in the bureau with clothing and so forth, and threw them out the upstairs window. And I'm telling you that next day, you talk about my mother having a mess. Clothing, broken drawers, just everything. But they meant well, and it was okay, but it got that hot. The chicken house that he used to operate while they were building this mill, and they kept doing feed business while they were building the new mill. The chicken house had tar paper on it, and the tar paper completely boiled out. It was just boiled up. The tar was rolled down on the ground. It got that hot. That's how close those buildings came to burning. So it was, I just wanted to mention that before I forgot. I might also add that when I came back home, my dad always had a lot of advice, a lot of wisdom. And he had a lot of, it was okay, it was good. It was good advice. Sometimes I would have done it differently, but anyway, it was all right. But I'll never forget, he told me, I said, in this business, you know, it's very easy. You can be dishonest with no problem. But he said, the day you have to be dishonest to stay in business is the day you get out. And think about it, but I think that's pretty sound advice for a lot of things. And I felt that was it. That was very good that he had that, gave me that advice on it. He also told me, you never stand still in business. You either go forward or backward. You don't stand still. If you think you're standing still, you're probably going backward a little bit. So I remember that and always tried to be a little aggressive and take any opportunities I could get, let's put it that way, to move ahead or to do something else or something new. But, so anyway, then what happened was he had replaced the Massey Harris business franchise with a John Deere franchise. And of course, as all of you know me, I've been a John Deere man ever since. But that's how that happened. He had replaced it. He had replaced it with that. But what happened then was about 1963, I was home 3 years, and in 1963, my dad and I built our first big chicken house. And that was a time when the era of bulk feed started coming in. Instead of having 100-pound bags, you got your feed dumped on the truck and you had a blower and you blew the feed into the bins. And we got a 1963 bag bulk truck, hauled 9 ton with a dump. No more shoveling. You could dump it. And what a treat that was. I think we thought we died and went to heaven. But anyway, and then later on we built our second chicken house, and we were continuing to grow in the poultry business pretty much. But then time progressed. We were into the fertilizer business. And this building right here, just the corner, it's the corner. Let me see which picture. I gotta get straightened out which pictures I have here. Yeah, it is the corner. You just see the corner of the building here. That's the warehouse. We built a fertilizer warehouse across the street. We built a fertilizer warehouse across the street, and then we started handling bulk fertilizer. We could blend it, and the different analysis came in, and then we also had room for bags. Same time, we installed a liquid nitrogen tank that held 6,000 gallons. Then the people started top dressing their grains with liquid nitrogen, and we got into that business. We ended up in the spraying business. We had 3 sprayer trucks and a high boy, and I think if you look at Dan Langhand's, his hair are a little light, but he does have hair. But I think the sprayer business lightened him a little extra. Am I right, Dan? That was it was a tough business, but anyway, we got into that and it worked all right. But we went on with it and put that in, and that was then when at that time was the first partnership that we got involved with, and my father and I joined with Bob Leitzel, the man from Pelham, bought a 10,000 bird laying house, and Bob was our caretaker. That was his part of the partnership. We provided feed and so forth, and we went into the laying chicken business. And we had that house for quite a few years, and eventually sold it to a dairy farmer who made a cow barn out of it. So, you know, the multi-use building, you can do a lot of things with them if you want to. And then about that same time, we started and we built our first feedlot on the farms. And it held up 250 beef cattle that we could fatten at one time. Later on, we built a second one, so we ended up with 2 feedlots and about 500 cattle that we could feed at one time, in fact, that we worked on that. Then 1970 came along, and I guess that's when Helen and I made our bold move. That's when we bought the business from my mother and dad in 1970, and we incorporated it, and that's where the M G Henninger Son Inc. comes from on the trucks and so forth. we incorporated as M G Henninger and Son, Inc. It was right around 1970. And you know, I knew what role my mother played, so I thought, you know what, Helen would fit in here. So I went to Helen. Now, we'd been married since '64 at that point, and I said to Helen, why don't you come back home, be my secretary, and help keep the books and so forth? And she thought, but not too long. And she came back and she said, there's 3 reasons I don't think I want to do that. She said, I went to college to be a teacher and I want to teach. And secondly, I always reverse numbers. You wouldn't want me to keep it. And thirdly, I don't think I want you for a boss 24 hours. And I think still that's the main reason. But anyhow, that idea didn't go very far. And Helen continued to teach and had a career in teaching and retired from Upper Dolphin. So that's okay there. That worked out all right. But it
We're
worked
still
out
married.
But anyway, during the 70s and 80s, we continued to grow. We added more farms when it's sort of like it is now. If a farm came up and it was close or something, then you could handle it financially. You would buy it. You would try and accumulate them, and we continued to do that. We started building turkey houses at that point, and we got into the poultry contracting business, kept adding trucks and people. We built a new shop that would take care of our own equipment. We had an inspection station so we could handle them ourselves. And needless to say, we needed more space, so then we added offices at the end of the mill. The mill was 40 by 90. We put the offices at the end of the mill. And I was more interested in the feed fertilizer business than I was in the John Deere business. So we dropped the John Deere franchise to make room, because that took up the whole bottom level of the building. We dropped that to make some more room for us over there in the mill, and then continued on that way. So that's when, but we did keep the John Deere lawn and garden business, and then we established a retail store with it as well. And in there we handled the John Deere lawn and garden tractors, we handled snowmobiles. I love snowmobiling since 1968, so that was sort of a hobby for me, but we always sold snowmobiles. Dan was never sure how much we made on them, but anyway, I had fun selling them anyhow, so he let me go ahead with it, and so forth. So we got to the point where we had to divide our company up responsibility-wise. And so we made 3 divisions. One division was M G Henninger Son, Inc. And that was the division that had the trucks, it had the feed business, it had the fertilizer business, the spraying business, the chemicals and so forth. And then the second one was, we divided into Henninger Farms. That way we had a farm manager and had that handled separately. And there's where we built the turkey houses, and the farms that grew turkeys for M G Henninger Son, Inc., who supplied the feed and so forth. And then we went into the 3rd division, which was L&H Contracting. L&H Contracting was Lynn and Howard, but that's what it stood for. But that was contract, and we sort of had a niche. We made a deal with processors like Empire Kosher. If anybody ever eat any Empire Kosher turkeys, I'm sure you're eating one of ours, because we pretty much supplied all their turkeys. But and then we dealt with them. Then we would go to the farmer, like the dentist back there, and we say, how about building a turkey house? And you take care of the turkeys, and we'll pay you for that. And that'll take care of your expenses, earn you a living. And we'll provide the feed, the turkeys, the service, and of course take care of selling them and getting them to the market. So that was pretty much the responsibility of L&H Contracting. And that really grew quite a bit for us over the years. And our peak year, I'm not sure exactly, but I think we produced probably about 10 million chickens and about 1 million turkeys, maybe 5,000 hogs. But we really had a lot of animals. Well, needless to say, that took a lot of trucks and a lot of feed. And we had 17 of these, of that picture right there. We had 17 of those to haul our feed and get the feed into the companies. Now, we also hauled feed for other people. We hauled feed for Perina Mills. We did a lot of custom work too. But it ended up taking pretty many trucks and so forth. Okay, so then during the 70s and 80s, we continued to grow and do these kinds of things in those three divisions. Now again, I was very fortunate because we had good, responsible people in our organization and on our team. And at that point is when Dan Lanhans came into the picture. Dan worked for Ralston Perina Company, and Perina always had a rep that called on us, and we'd get at least a day from them every week. And Dan was our rep that called on us. Well, we got to know each other pretty well, and we seemed to be on the same page pretty much. And so then in 1989, Dan came to work for us full time and took over as general manager of the operations. And this was one of the best moves that we ever made, having Dan do that for us and being there to look after things. Now, what that did for us, and what that did for me, is having someone like Dan and our good team working, gave me a little time to diversify and look at some other things. You know, did you ever ask yourself, do you want to be a big fish in a little pond, or do you want to be a little fish in a big pond? You can think about that. My point is, I never wanted to be the biggest turkey guy or the most trucks or the most farms. I like to diversify, and I felt that maybe when one was high, the other one was low, it carried it, and vice versa and so forth. And so that was pretty much what then, when Dan came and helped me take over, that we started doing. And we started diversifying. And I won't go into detail, but I'll just give you a little bit of a synopsis of some of the things we did at that point. We formed another dealership, for example, in Mifflintown, actually. Remember Dan, the Ag Center? And Don Miller and I, and two partners, Gary Boyer and Galen Riley, built the Ag Center, and there was another Perina dealership like ours, supplying the farmers in the Mifflinburg area. And we also ended up, this is a little bit interesting, with the big mill in Lewisburg. How many of you have been at the antique place at the big mill in Lewisburg? All right, we owned that one time. And the guy that owns it now is smarter than we were. My brother-in-law always said, he's smarter than us. We had it, and we were, after we left that and sold the dealership up there, we called it a white elephant. It was white then. We didn't know what we wanted to do with it, and we didn't need it. So we ended up selling it to the guy that put all those antique stores in there. And we always said he was a lot smarter than us. I believe it's working pretty good for him. Anyway, we kidded about that a lot. And Dawn and I also then formed another, the Upper Dolphin Swine Center. We bought a hog farm, and we had 200 sows, what they call fair to finish. And we put that farm in existence. And then later, same time, give or take, I don't have dates, we bought the Upper Dolphin Grain Center, the grain center behind Walmart, that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. We owned that for many years, and we bought that out of bankruptcy. That was actually built by Elwood Williard, who was running Spread Eagle Farms at that time, and then they ran into financial problems, and then Don and I bought that out of bankruptcy. And we grew it, and we made 600,000 bushels of storage. We built a full fertilizer blending plant where we made our own analysis and could make it our own fertilizer, and built some turkey houses, and really grew it into a pretty nice operation. Had it for many years until we actually carried. And we did a unique thing. We developed a grain bank, and it worked just like a bank, and we called it a grain bank. All the local farmers could bring grain in, they could sell it, they could buy it, they could store it, they could take part of it out today, or they could put more in tomorrow, and we just kept track of the grain movement, and they paid us storage for whatever was there. And it worked out like the bank might pay interest, and it worked out very well. And I think it was a big benefit to the farmers in our community. I always felt like we did pretty right by them by doing that. And then we continued on doing some other things. Don and Dwight Huffman and Tim Mosby and we bought bought 20 acres of land and built Deerfield Ag and Turf. If any of you ever went by on 180 when you're going up by Watsontown and on up to Williamsport, it's on the left. It's a pretty large John Deere dealership there now. Well, we built that and we operated that for a number of years, and that worked very well. It worked very well for us also. Then later on, we came back down here and took Fred Meckley in as a partner and merged his dealership that he had at Mendata, and we took Horner Motors' old garage, redid it, and put a Prime Line Incorporated in there, where we had a Kubota dealership, John Deere, Cub Cadet. We had a full rental store, and we ran that for a number of years, and that worked pretty nice for us. And then we ended up actually buying Tobias equipment. Before then, we sold everything to the George Cut Cabbages. So we also, and that was a different partner. I had a partner by the name of Lynn Hoover. We owned a poultry farm in Berks County where we could raise 132,000 broilers at a time. We raised 132,000 chickens at one time. There was four big houses. So that worked out pretty nice and was of interest to it. And at the getting near the end of my time, we were establishing a freight division where we had trucks that we hauled for Super Ride and so forth, and we were establishing that. And at this point in 1994, which now seems pretty long ago, I hit a pretty big bump in the road. Dan was with me that day, and we had a pretty tough meeting that morning we were working on, and he accused me of being a little hyper that day. He claims that we stopped at Wendy's and I wouldn't wait, it took too long, and then we stopped at McDonald's and I wouldn't wait, it took them too long. I think we finally got a hot dog in Mandated, but we got back to the mill and one of the girls said I was wanted on the phone, and I went around my desk to get the phone, and as I went around my desk, my left leg just went numb. I sort of slouched into my chair and I always pick the phone up with my left hand. Went to pick up my phone, I couldn't move my hand. So I thought, well, I took my right hand, I'll pick it up. I couldn't talk. Then I knew I was in trouble. Long story short, I had a stroke, was in the hospital the best part of a week, and things weren't too well. And then the doctor and Helen sat down and had a talk with me. And I guess I was trying to burn the candle with two ends, as the old saying goes. And the doctor says, you keep this up, you're not going to be around. So then it was time to divest instead of invest. And we started slowly to do that. It was probably the toughest decision I ever made. You know, it's a lot harder to get out of business than to get in business. Always remember that. And anyway, it was a tough decision for me, but we did it. People like Dan, I was concerned about them, but people like Dan and Barb, they're all right. But I still needed to be concerned, but they went on and went into the Subway franchise business and have done extremely well and are doing well. Now their sons are running it and so forth, and so it worked out okay, I think. But anyway, it was a pretty tough time, and I started divesting, but took my time. Helen's claims she had a drive for me for almost a year. I don't know if it was that long.
Well, you got to drive locally sooner, but anything out of the valley.
You drove.
Yeah, I drove.
That's scary. But anyway, I'm kidding. I gotta tell you a story about Helen. Real quick. And I'm gonna tell you. One day, in those days, I guess, as Dan said, I got a little hyper sometimes. I was, wound up. I was looking for Helen. And I couldn't find Helen. I don't know where she was. Anyway, I don't remember the real details, but I know I finally caught up to her. Questioned her, I guess, where she was and so forth. And I said, Helen, you've got a gas ass. And she looked me right in the eye. Didn't say a word, didn't get mad, didn't kick my shin. She looked me in the eye and she said, who is calling who a gas ass? I turned around and walked away, and I can assure you I never used that term again. I got the point. But anyway, it was just one of those things that happened, but we went on through. Well, anyway, we divested, and then I find myself in the position, or we found ourselves in the position, we had some empty turkey houses that were a negative cash flow. We were paying insurance, we were paying taxes, and yet we were out of business. We weren't using them. Thought about it for quite a while, and then I met with Dave Barter. Many of you know Dave Barter. He was our, of course, our teacher, our building trades teacher. I'll get it out. And I met with Dave, and his family I knew had been in the storage business, so he had some experience in that. And of course, he was extremely talented in reconstruction, carpentry, whatever it is, you name it. Dave is second to none. And we decided to form a partnership, and that's when Hen House Storage, which exists now right below Barrysburg, was formed. And we started out with 3 buildings, and now we have 10 buildings and about 174 storage units, and it's doing very well for us. And that business we're still in, but it's because Dave's a very good partner and does all the front work, and it's worked out all right for us. But that was my last endeavor, was the Hen House Storage, and sort of out of necessity, but it did work out for us. So in closing, I'm going to just look at this pretty closely because I don't want to miss anything. But with all humility, and I mean that sincerely, the good Lord was good to us. But with all humility, I had the privilege of probably either owning or being a partner in 10 or 11 companies in my life. And they were all challenging. They all took a lot of time. They were all successful. And it was very enjoyable. But I couldn't have done that because it wasn't just me. I couldn't have done that if it hadn't been for people like Dan, the people that were in our team. When I got sick, we had 55 employees. We had about, 50 freight trailers and 50 freight tractors, 17 of these kinds of trucks, and so forth. We had 10 farms and about 1,100 acres. At our heights, we farmed about 2,000 acres, counting rented ground. So we'd had a pretty good ride. We went for it, and we had a good time. But without these kind of people, and that lady sitting there, it could have never happened. She had many a late meal for me. She called Lynn, when are you coming? I'll be home in 15 minutes. I hate to tell you, I'll let her answer it.
An hour.
I didn't get it many times. But because of these kind of people, we had a great ride, and I'm thankful. You know, sometimes you look back and say, well, would you do it again? I do things different maybe at some place, but yeah, I'd do it again. It was great. Thanks for your attention. I hope I didn't bore you.
That's very nice.
Are there any questions for Lynn?
Yeah, any questions, I'll be happy to share with you. That's my dad, by the way, on the right. I didn't have any hair there either, but they weren't all gray at that time. I think that picture might be in the late 90s. When do you say, Dan?
Hold it up.
Yeah.
It's
And that's
my dad was 94 when he passed away.
Mid-90s,
And,
so good.
He was 94 when he passed away, but I think that's about when that was. My mother was 82 when she passed away. But one other plug I'll give my father, and then I'll sit down again. You know, so many times, and I've seen this, where children, sons, come home to a business, and okay, they're going to be part of it. And they're going to eventually run it. And even I've seen it where families have built things up to make room for them, but they end up being nothing but a hired hand. And what happens next is they're gone, and it doesn't work out. My father was the opposite. If I had an idea and he thought it had made any sense at all, go for it. And so I was very fortunate that he had that attitude.
I want to share something just for a second.
Yes, please.
So Lynn's been like another dad to me. You know,
I'm old enough.
yeah. We're close, and he's always been like another dad. But this is how life is so interesting. I lived in Western New York State and worked on a college farm. And I was building a hog house for the college, and I needed some support from a guy who worked at this chicken house. So I'd go over to this chicken house and see the guy, and these trucks would come in. M G Henninger Son, Barrysburg, Pennsylvania. Thinking, where is that? Who's this M G Henninger Son? And so I'd see those trucks, and then one night we came down to Pennsylvania, some people at the college, to look at a hog facility. And the way home, before 322 was all the lanes, the traffic was backed up terrible. So I got a map out and I said, there's this 225 that goes up over the mountain. We'll go that way to get to Sunbury. So we go up 225, we come to a stop sign in Barrysburg, Pennsylvania. And I go, this is where that company's from, you know, that company. So fast forward a few years, Ralston Prita hires me, and they bring me as a management trainee to work with M G Henninger Son. And so it's interesting, and then Lynn hired me from Prita. So it's interesting how your life, things happen in your life. And it was sort of mean because we've been great friends. He's helped our family immensely, and we love living here in the valley. So it was a great thing that we met because it changed our lives dramatically, you know. And I appreciate it very much, him and Helen, very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Dennis?
I don't have too much to say about the ag business with Lynn. I did buy dog feed over there. I used to argue that the price is a little high for a bag of dog feed. But my experience with Lynn was on school board, of course. And I told Mr. Lannings here earlier, when we did budget, now Lynn didn't have the details of the budget, but he had the overall picture of the budget on a styrofoam cup. So I assume you mentioned your mother, you got your math explanation from her, is that correct? And the other thing was, he mentioned snowmobiling. He's right, he loves the snowmobile. But he also likes it very warm in a room. He'd come to school board meeting on the snowmobile, and then he'd want the heat turned up. And I never understand the guy that loved to be out in the cold snowmobiling, wanted the heat turned up in the boardroom. But that was it. But he was one of the best school board members that I served with, really. Enjoyed working with him there. Very good. He asked good questions. He and I didn't agree on everything, but he was always fair, I thought.
Thank you, Dennis. The feeling is mutual. I enjoyed working with you. Yeah.
Diane?
Are you retired now?
Pretty much.
Are you still active in?
I'm still like that. I do all of my own, pretty much of our paperwork, and still involved with the storage center, the storage units down at in-house storage. And but other than that, I still like to play a little. I'm 83, be 84 my next birthday hopefully, and still like to ride a little motorcycle, a little snowmobile, and so forth. So yeah, but pretty much.
And I worked for you for a while.
Yes,
Remember?
that's a long time ago. Well, how long is that?
It was late 70s.
Okay, okay, all right. I just can't say enough for the people that worked for us. They're such good people.
Well, you brought out the best in a lot of people.
I don't know about that, but they were good people. I mean that. I respect. A lot of the ladies there in the office and stuff, always good, always right on. Same way with my drivers, my people. I'm thankful for that.
He respected the women in his office. He really did. He wasn't worried about hiring the female or male or whatever, but whoever could do the job, and he did have some very good people there.
Yep.
As far as the school board went, I was a newbie on there and I didn't know anything when I got on. But Lynn never talked down to me and he was always willing to answer questions and even listen to maybe what I had, might have been naive comments, but he always listened and made what we had to say. So I always appreciated that.
Thank you.
Diane.
I grew up in Berrysburg. And I've known Lynn since I was a little kid because my older brother and him were the same age and in school together.
And good friends.
But I didn't get to know Lynn and Helen until we joined the same motorcycle club. And we are motorcycle people.
Yep.
Anyone else? Heidi?
I knew Lynn and Helen for years. My dad helped Lynn at night.
Yes, he
came
did.
home from work.
Dad helped a lot. Murder.
But he used to take me along to the mill, and the ladies would be there working in the office, and I'd be crawling all over all the equipment and up and down, and Lynn would come out and talk and laugh. It didn't bother him a bit. And, I'd be like, I loved it there. I was like, Dad, can we go out to the mill for a while, We had lots of good times.
Yes, we did. Yeah. A lot of good camping times.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
My dad used to tell me stories that your dad used to teach young farmers.
That's correct.
I guess I worked at Berrysburg School, but I guess they didn't have a clock or anything. And he'd ask somebody what time it was, and they'd always tell him it was later than it was, so they don't get out.
So they get out of
But then he told Troutman over there, he was a religious man. He would ask him, because then he would
tell him. That's a good story. I remember that. I didn't mention that about my dad. But he, again, when I talk about his talents, after World War II on the GI Bill, these returning veterans, they had a program for them to start farming, and then they had a T-shirt for them. And Mr. Kell, at that time, who ran it, hired my father to be the teacher for these returning veterans on the farms, and he would visit each one of those one time a week. He would go see them if they had any problems, or if he could help them, or whether it be welding, wiring, so forth. I remember going with him a few times, and again, that was just, he did so many things to try to make things happen. But the one thing he told me when I came back, he said, the mistake I made, I don't want you to make. He said, I tried to do it all myself. He said, don't do that. Let capable people do it for you, and you manage and see that it happens. But if you try to do it all yourself, you won't get near accomplished it. Good advice.
Anyone else? Very good, Lynn. We
Oh,
enjoyed
okay.
hearing. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, we're gonna take about a 15-minute break. I'd like to invite